welcome back to the Power and Community podcast brought to you by Art of Me. We are a nonprofit organization that works with young people to share their stories and perspectives through writing, art, and film. We have some amazing people on today. I'm going to introduce them, but then I'm going to also let them introduce themselves. Today we have Josh Leong on. He is a writer, director, and producer based in New York City. His work has been screened at 5 Academy Award qualifying festivals and in 11 countries across the world. So obviously a really cool person who's been around the world a little bit. And then we have Sophia Bara. Sophia Bara is an Argentinian writer and producer based in New York City. Sophia has produced numerous commercials and short films specializing in international production. Most recently, she produced the short film The Other Side with writer, director, and producer Josh Leong. Welcome to the podcast, y'all.
Thank you so much, Chanda, for having us on. Really happy and really excited to share and answer any questions.
Yeah, we're super happy to be here. And again, we're more than excited to talk a little bit about the film, a little bit about our work as filmmakers. And yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming on. And I'm excited to ask you all these questions because not only does this help our students and our teachers, but I also get to learn because I'm also interested in filmmaking as well. So when I meet people who are already tapped in, I'm like, I have so many questions to ask. So welcome. Let's just start off with you both telling us a little bit more about who you are. So I gave more of the professional introduction, but can you let us know more of who you are, how you identify, all those things?
Totally, I can give it a go first. So again, for those listening, watching, my name is Sophia. I actually just graduated from NYU, which is where I met Josh a little bit more than 3 years ago. I love telling true stories based on real events and stuff like that. I majored at NYU in film and TV production and also a little bit of business. And now I'm currently working at a talent agency as an assistant. I don't know, I think filmmaking to me is my absolute passion, and I love just not only the creative side of it, but also the more boring business side, which is a lot of the negotiations and everything that happens behind the scenes in order to bring something together.
And I'm Josh. I'm from Virginia, and I first got into film actually at an Apple store in Virginia where I learned iMovie on the computers. And I used to just make little home videos with my friends in the backyard until I started making short films and go to NYU. And so I'm a senior. I'll be graduating in the fall. But yeah, like Sophia, I think I've had a passion for kind of telling untold stories, things that are inspired by true stories. And I mean, if you want to get to know about me, you have to know when I was in high school, I went on a ton of missions trips with my church, and a lot of those gave me a lot of exposure to perspectives around the world and to disenfranchised communities and disenfranchised people. And I think that has shown up a lot in the work that both of us do. And most recently in The Other Side, which was the short film that we shot in Ethiopia just over 1.5 2 years ago.
You all have amazing stories. I'm over here oh my gosh. It's so funny, Sophia, you said the boring part. I honestly think production is very interesting. And I think people who can do production are very interesting people because it's very intense and I think detail oriented, and I am not her. But so I don't want to say that it's boring. I think it's actually amazing. But I think what I'm really inspired by listening to you both is that you did choose to tell stories that are international and not just things that are in your own backyard, which I think it's always cool to see people who see something that might not directly affect them, but also want to tell those stories because you want to empower and change what's happening in that community. You both kind of touched on this a little bit already, but can you dig more into how did you know that film was something you wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, Chanda, actually, I did move from Argentina a little bit over 12 years ago. And when I first moved here, as I was trying to learn English, I turned a lot to books. Most recently, you might already know, Shadow and Bone came out on Netflix. That was actually one of the first one of the first novels trilogies that I latched onto. I loved the idea of world building, of exploring not only creating your characters and cultures and all this stuff, but just telling stories from different perspectives, and having come like moving from a different country opened my eyes, to the world beyond. I see a lot, as I travel back and forth to Argentina and the States, the cultural change has, like you mentioned, opened my eyes to so many other different perspectives of the world we live in today. And so I actually started as a writer. I still love writing very much, but I slowly started taking some film classes in high school, and I decided that, I'm passionate about stories, but also how they translate visually, how you can actually, show them to the world. And then, I applied to NYU not knowing what I was getting myself into, and I ended up finding my passion.
Yeah, I think, similar to Sophia, a lot of this came from, a very young age. To be honest, when I started messing around with my parents', camcorder, it was not intellectual. I wasn't picking up film to tell particular stories or anything. It was really just to make me and my friends laugh and to have a good time. And so I think we eventually began to learn that there were so many cool things that we could do to tell stories. With this medium. And I think once you learned kind of the tools, the basic skill set of, how to execute certain things, you know how to evoke emotion, you know how to get audiences invested. And I was a kid who learned everything from YouTube. I grew up on Film Riot and Corridor Digital and Freddie W, and just wanting to emulate the stuff that they did. And I think that's how I essentially got to where I am. But I think now today, filmmaking has taken on a different, tone of its own as well, because I do now know that individuals and people who watch my films often really do resonate, and in a way that they'll reach out to me and they'll let me know. And I think that kind of validation and that kind of, realization that we're not just telling random stories and making little videos, we're making things that connect with individuals, that prove that we're not alone out here and that we do experience things together. And I think that's what makes me stay and makes me excited about the kind of stuff that we get to do now. So yeah.
I mean, if I could just jump in quickly, I totally resonate with that as well. I think there's something about like the visual medium of filmmaking that, I don't know, it happened to me, like I would read these things, and then when I watch them on the screen, you see yourself in it. But also you learn, you know what I mean? Like I think from the stories that we tell, for instance, the point is that you can see yourself and connect emotionally to our characters. And then find out that, for instance, in terms of the other side, not to jump ahead a little bit, but it is a true story. It's inspired on real events. And I think that idea of being able to escape to a world and at the same time learn and see it with your own eyes is something that has always been very appealing about filmmaking.
You can tell this is both of your passion, because you already jumped ahead on one question. I was like, how does film empower you and the communities around you? And Josh, you definitely already answered that. And Sophia piggybacked on it. It's about things being close to you. Like when you're hearing and seeing stories, like being close to those characters. And I think even Sophia said, being able to resonate. Film is kind of like playwriting a little bit, like a stage, where stage is like the audience connecting with the characters on stage, and it's like immediate, right? Well, film is not as immediate, but it's that same desire and want between the person watching the film and the characters, and music and colors and stories that we're seeing. Like it is that connection, which I definitely connected with the other side, even though I have a totally different experience. I connected with it and could understand and was even frustrated at certain points with the character Abel. Was it Abel?
It's pronounced Abel, but
Abel.
not like Abel. Yeah.
Okay. Abel. Okay, great. I have it. So yeah, I was even frustrated with this character at one point, and we will get to talking about that. But let's even just introduce the audience that's listening in. Sophia produced The Other Side, and Josh, excuse me. Sorry, let me start that sentence over, who's ever editing. Sophia produced The Other Side and Josh directed it. So The Other Side is a film that just came out. Firstly, I just want to say this film was amazing. I did take the time to watch it. From the colors to the music to the story itself, so many topics were addressed, such as brotherhood, friendship, survival, poverty, love, and even being orphaned. Where did the idea of the film come from? Why did you want to tell this story? You both can answer this.
Yeah, for sure. I think, like I mentioned before, I'd been on a couple mission trips with my church, and this kind of originated in 2018 when I went on a trip to Ethiopia. And I had spent a week in some of the boys' government orphanages in the country. And I was also learning about Ethiopia's abandoned children crisis, where over 5% of the entire country, which is 5 million children, remain orphaned. And that's due to a variety of factors, including, poverty, HIV/AIDS, the lack of female empowerment programs. But, you know, I was able to see that crisis through the lens of several children that I met in those orphanages. And one of them happened to be a 16-year-old boy named Abel. And I befriended him, early on, and because he happened to be one of the only kids who spoke English. And I just began to learn a little bit more about his life and his hopes and his dreams, about how he wanted to become a filmmaker when he grew up, and how, when you're 16 years old, no one really adopts, teenagers. They adopt a lot of babies, they adopt a lot of younger kids. And so his story was pretty common, honestly, amongst a lot of the older kids in the orphanage. And that was a story that really stuck to me. And I also learned that he had a little brother. And in Ethiopia, when you turn 18, you have to graduate from your orphanage and live on the streets. It's much like the foster care system in the United States. And he was 2 years away from graduating, 2 years from going onto the streets, and 2 years from being separated from his brother. So when I came back to the United States that fall, I started my freshman year at NYU, and I met Sophia, and we were, talking about this story and talking about, what I'd seen, and I felt compelled to write a script about it. And Sophia was super down to say, hey, let's make this into a movie. And we were going to bend over backwards to make it happen. And so, flash forward to July of 2019, 1 year later, we were able to fly back to Ethiopia, this time with a cast and crew, to make this movie into a reality.
Sophia, can you talk to us about when Josh came to you with this story, why you wanted to be a part of it?
I mean, first of all, just hearing about his experience like on that missions trip, and Josh, I think he's being humble here. He filmed the whole web series. I don't know if he mentioned it in full, but it was super interesting, and like it looked fun and it was amazing. But then hearing him talk about the statistics and about this kid that he met and the bond that he formed with this kid over that time, it was just something that to me, I felt, I was like, this story has to be told, and it would be an honor and absolute pleasure, to be a part of it. So, I remember exactly where we were at NYU. We were sitting, for those listening in, from NYU, we were sitting on like the 11th floor lounge, just like, let's figure out a way to do this. Like, how will we bring about this story? And it was just something that excited me, that I felt, I could see Josh's passion for it. And I said, this is something that is an adventure. It is an adventure with a purpose. So, I mean, yeah, it was just, that was the beginning.
If I may, Sophia really, really squeezed herself into this project. And when we sat down, she said, let me schedule this thing for you.
I was like,
let's make a schedule. So then the schedule was on her computer, and then it was like, well, I guess you got to produce this now. So.
Yeah, I was like, okay, we're going to schedule this. We're going to organize it. I've got folders now. Total producer mentality kicked in.
It seems like it was meant to be. Sophia's like, let me get out the Excel sheet. I have it ready. We're gonna get this done. So I did want to talk a little bit about the characters. So the characters, Abel and Kia. Did I say that right? Kia. Okay, thank you. Abel and Kia have a sweet but complex relationship. Some of that comes from, I think, a difference in age, and therefore their perspective would be a little bit different. And when you were making this film, did you feel that a lot of the Ethiopian children who are parentless, did they side on the side of Abel or Kia? Did you see people with hope, and then did you see some people who were just resolute as like, this is what's about to happen? And I actually don't mean to say people, I meant to say children. Did you see people kind of on these extremes in the middle? What was your experience, Josh?
I think it was a little bit of both. Obviously I talked about this a little bit before, but the adoption rates for older children are far, far lower than really, really young kids. And so I think the chances of getting adopted after you're, above the age of like 6 or 7, really, really exponentially drops. And although in the movie, Kia is 14 and Abel is 17, Kia still has this, hopeful perspective of that, maybe one day they'll be adopted. But I think in Ethiopia, a lot of the older children that we were around with um, are really kind of not really expecting to get adopted anymore. And I think it speaks to a little bit about the stigma around domestic adoptions in Ethiopia. It's a little bit stigmatized adopting someone else's child, raising a child that's not your own. And so in Ethiopia, especially, domestic adoptions are very uncommon. And so I think a lot of these children are very used to this idea that I will just never have a family, or I'll never have parents. And so it's a little bit more normalized. I don't want to say that in the wrong way, but a lot of the children in Ethiopia certainly do not have, I suppose, such a rosy, hopeful view of being adopted. A lot of the best case scenarios for these children are not necessarily adoption. I think that's something that, as Americans and coming from a first world country, we like to see as the band-aid, the solution to orphan crises. It's just mass adoption. When I do think that a lot of the solutions that we need to be highlighting and addressing actually comes down to empowerment of these kids, education, job opportunities, just teaching them how to become self-sufficient and to fight for themselves, I think are all equally as important, if not more important, than just hoping that they'll get adopted.
Because we see in the film, we do see Abel turn to certain ways to survive. And I think like people who are on the outside looking in might say, oh, look, there's another child being mischievous or just being quote unquote bad. But honestly, he's like trying to prepare himself for what's going to happen when he ages out of the orphanage. I thought particularly, I don't want to spoil the film, but I thought one part that was really interesting was the watch scene, and you both know how that played out, but just seeing this tourist there with this expensive thing, and then seeing Abel eyeing it and just kind of planning how he's going to handle the situation, I thought was just extremely interesting to see it from that point of view, because I could see how someone from a different point of view might say, that's wrong, they shouldn't be doing this, but it's like, it's survival more than it is somebody's just intent to want to do something that's not right. But it's like, how do I survive? How do I begin to plan out my life? This watch could give me money. It could bring me food. It could be a way for me to be all right. And I think I just thought that was so interesting compared to Kia, who has these dreams of people coming in and saving him and teaching him and loving him and parenting him. So I don't know. It was, when I say that I was like frustrated, but I saw both parts. I just want to say you did that really well in this film, where I was just like, oh, man, like I understand Abel's point, but then also I understand Kia's point, and then there's this in between. So it was just, I just want to say that was great. But I love that this is a narrative story documentary. And what I mean by that is that like, it's like, this is the true story of somebody's life, but then also you tell it in this very cinematic way that's like more of a narrative story. And I'm one of those people who can't sit through documentaries. Like they have to be really weird or whatever for me to sit through them. So I'm like, wow, this is really fascinating, but I can't sit through them to save my life. How did you both stay true to the actual story of Abel, excuse me. How did you both stay true to the story of Abel while also creating a narrative that those of us unaware of what's happening in Ethiopia can understand and empathize with?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, that's a multifaceted, question, I think. I'm a little bit also of the mind that, documentaries are harder to get people to watch, certain kinds of people to watch. And certainly there's something more emotionally, gripping about seeing it in a narrative. And so while it was inspired by a true story and kind of, simulated around the story of Abel's life, it is still fiction to an extent. Abel is a representation of a lot of children, and the story that we have is not exactly, it's not fact, but it's quite inspired by the life of Abel. And so I think a lot of those things, in order to get it to that point, was just to be very aware of the crisis as we knew it, try to get as much information as we could, try to pull from enough sources, and make sure that the things that we were projecting onto our characters and into this movie were accurate to the crisis at hand and respectful to the culture and the country that we were representing. I think we'll get more into that a little bit later, just about how to truthfully tell a story like this, especially one that has so much nuance. But I think that's certainly the mindset that we had going into it.
I mean, yeah, I think like we can, like what Josh was saying, I'm sure we'll get into it later on, what steps you can take to make sure that you stay true to a story that's not your own. But the most important part, I mean, to reiterate, and we'll probably say it many, many times throughout this, is just for us, it was just to be able to say and recognize, we're not Ethiopian. Like, this is not really our story to tell, but Josh had this personal connection to it. So it was our charge to bring it forward and to connect with the local communities as much as possible to make sure that this is being told appropriately, that we're staying true not only to Abel's story, but to the Ethiopian story, right, of this, because it's something very personal to him and to the people there. So throughout the entire process, it was our priority to make sure that we were getting the right people on board, that were experts, and that, like we'll say time and time again, and like we always say, that we were listeners, right? As opposed to pretending that, this was something that we were total experts, like, and know-it-alls on.
Interesting. Yeah, we've had a couple filmmakers come on to talk about other communities that they've did documentaries on. And I think the key to what you both are saying is being listeners, is understanding that it's not your story, is connecting with the community so that you can tell the most raw and real version of what's happening. Can we talk a little bit about the process of creating the film? What was that like? Was the atmosphere heavy? Because this is a heavy topic. And were there any challenges that you ran into? I mean, you can, from any challenges in any extenuating situations, whether it be the weather or people or equipment, anything you could think of.
You have no idea. I feel like if you don't mind, I'm gonna take point on this, because that's a lot of what my work was, what I handled as the producer. It was everything like contingency planning and also like fixing problems along the way. I think the biggest challenge and the most obvious challenge was that the fact that we were filming this, where we were pre-production at least, was in the States, and we were just preparing to shoot within 10 days, a very limited amount of time that we had to be in the country. We were very fortunate to have worked alongside an Ethiopian producer as well, like partnered with us. He was essential in helping us find cast, crew, locations, etc. Permitting, for instance, which is, there are very specific laws in Ethiopia about that as well. And no matter how much, like we mentioned, I have thousands of spreadsheets. I had like plan A, B, C schedules or whatever. It kind of all went out the window because we happened to fly out during rainy season in Ethiopia. And like you mentioned, weather, this was one of the biggest problems, because the weather, if you look at the weather app, it just says it's gonna rain all day. And we got there, we were like, shoot, this is not good. But, within the first couple of days that we had set for scouting and adjusting to time difference or whatever, we realized that, if it rains in the morning, it won't rain in the afternoon. And if it doesn't rain in the morning, it'll rain in the afternoon. So that was a bit of not risky, but it was like something that we had to take day by day. And honestly, we are extremely grateful for the amazing crew that we had along the way, because they were very flexible and very adaptable to all the changes in the schedule. But given that, the weather did dictate a lot of our schedule and a lot of, the pace that we were moving at. There were days that we were able to shoot everything. There were days that we had to switch around like very frequently, scenes depending on whether we were planning inside or outside or whatever. But I will say it definitely it affected a lot some of the scenes that we did, for instance. And I think this is one of the stories that we love to tell, that, and sorry for the spoilers, but when the final scene where Abel and Kia fight, originally we had scheduled, X amount of shots. Like I want to say there were like 28 shots, like different setups or whatever that we were supposed to make. We wanted it at like the perfect time during golden hour, blue hour, right? Like a very specific time. But the orphanage that we were shooting at just happened to be right next to a mosque. So we're like, cameras up, we're about to roll, and a service starts playing next door, like on the speakers. There's, ceremonial music or whatever. And we had to stop. We're like, we can't cut this, because it's very heavy and it's going to go on for like 2 hours, 3 hours. And then on top of that, it started drizzling. So we're like, okay, now we actually have to move fast. And we love to tell a story because our actors had only rehearsed it in parts. There's the part of the argument and there's the part of the physical fighting with stunts. So this time around, we were like, okay, so how you rehearsed it separately? Now you're going to have to do it all together, rolling, like camera rolling. So we all hurried up. A lot of us hid behind rocks. Like if you see in the shot, there's like big masses, like there's people all over the place. And we rolled a couple of times and we had to do one continuous take. And that was obviously part of this amazing effort on behalf of our actors who did a phenomenal job. We had to be like, okay, you see that tall grass right there? Okay, aim to land there so you don't hurt yourselves. And then obviously our cinematographer, Tom, did a phenomenal job with doing it in one take. Everyone really was able to adjust to it, roll with it, and then pull off like this amazing, emotional and beautiful scene. All of this really long-winded answer to say that it was a lot of, a lot of changes along the way, a lot of problems. We just kept pushing because at the end of the day, it was a passion project. And it was just, like Josh said, we were just willing to bend over backwards to just get it made. I hope that answers the question.
No, it does. I mean, because I thought that it was going to be challenging, especially because it's an international project. But just even hearing that you found some people along the way who were willing to walk with you, an Ethiopian producer, that's dope. And then also, like, that's one of the things about filmmaking that makes me so nervous is the running with the punches type thing, because I I would be like, I need a break. I have to walk away. But to see you all push through is definitely inspiring. And it shows that this work is not for the faint-hearted. It really isn't, which I already knew. But I was like, look, I'm going to have to learn how to just be a little bit more mentally strong, emotionally strong to be able to produce something great, which I'm glad you guys were.
Yeah, and along those lines, like it definitely was hard. Like physically, it's exhausting when you're on set, but even before, in the months that lead up to it, where you don't know for sure if it's going to happen or not, especially like we can talk about fundraising, especially, it's a mental challenge because it's something that you care about so much, and you're doing everything you can, but there's just some days that are like, is this going to work out or not? That's the beauty of independent filmmaking. We always say, as an independent filmmaker, indie films at least, they have to be something that you're very passionate about because it's hard. You don't have the security of a studio or, a big name to like carry you through. Most of the times it's just, the people that are with you along the way. Like we say, it's a moving train. You just have to find people that are willing to jump on and run through with it with you. But in terms of the months that were leading up to it, it was extremely like all of that. It was constantly changing. Like I can talk a little bit about casting, for instance. Ethan, who played Abel, he is from, you might know him from When They See Us, which is Ava DuVernay's series on Netflix about the Central Park Five. He actually, we were able to get him on through my freshman year roommate. She was best friends, with him from home, and we joked about like bring him on, and then it turned into, okay, like actually maybe, and then we got in contact with, his representation, like his manager, and she was on board because her friend had adopted 2 kids from Ethiopia as well, And so it was this massive, like, whoa, like the connection that like this carries from places that we don't even know it's coming from. And then it was about, you know, convincing his agents. And at first we thought it wasn't going to work out. There was problems. There was another thing he was supposed to be on, another project, all these things. And then, you know, I think it was June. We started talking to him in like March, right? Like when They See Us was coming out. By June, we finally were like, okay, we can sign the papers to bring him on. It was just such a long process and a lot of like, you know, doubt along the way. But I mean, something to really keep in mind in terms of production is that we were students, and you know, mentally we still are. Like, I just graduated in May, Josh is graduating in December. We really like encourage filmmakers to just make use of the resources around them. Like, I learned everything. I gotta say, you know, this was one of the first projects I ever produced, and I say it in the best way because like I was able to leech off of like all the professors at NYU, all of the resources there. They were just so willing to help and teach us along the way that, you know, even though I made mistakes along the way, I was just putting in practice what I was learning. But your community of filmmakers that surrounds you is like the most vital resource.
Yeah, I wanted to say that with filmmakers, and we talk to the students on the podcast about this all the time, is the not waiting until you reach a certain point to do something. And I think that sometimes life puts you in that way where you do have to kind of wait until you experience certain things to be able to do something well. But utilizing what you have now to tell a story is so important. I think a lot of the times, we had someone on earlier and he gave the same advice, not to wait until you get the special camera and the $3,000 lens or whatever, but just to use what you have now, rather that be people around you who may be more knowledgeable in a subject, and the equipment that you have now, because it really is about the story you want to tell. So I love that you threw that in there, because we shouldn't wait. Students who are listening, teachers, you really shouldn't wait. It's about the story that needs to be told. What were lessons that you both learned as filmmakers that you will keep with you for the next project you embarked on? So in doing this film, what is something that you like, for the next time, I'm going to remember that. I have to remember that. This is important to me as a producer, as a director, writer.
I think the first lesson is to find yourself as Sophia, and don't let her go. No, but in all seriousness, I think, you know, building a team that is as passionate about this as you, the people that you can rely on, the people that are going to get you through the tough spots, because there are going to be tough spots. And one of the things is that, you know, we always love to do whenever we were putting together a team or hiring for this kind of film, was to make sure that everybody that, you know, who's on your project knows why we're doing what we're doing. This is not just a job. This is not just a career. This is not just a project that we're doing. I want everyone on our set to know why we're telling this story, why we decided to come all the way back to Ethiopia, and the importance and the reason why behind we do this. Because I think when everyone's bought in on the why, we feel so much more proud, and our work has more meaning to it. I think you can overcome so many more obstacles and so many more logistical challenges when we're all, you know, bound together in this little family that is really sold on what we're doing. And so, you know, for those projects that particularly have a social, you know, issue behind it, or meaning, or a real message that you're trying to convey, I would encourage, you know, directors, producers, whoever's in charge, really make it a point to explain to your team what this is. Make sure that everyone's bought in on your vision. That's super duper important. And, you know, in addition to that, I think just being flexible, understanding, you know, that things will go wrong, and you need to be aware of what's going wrong, and being able to think two steps ahead, and to be okay with things getting crazy. You know, but also, just like Sophia was saying before, we are not, no one is an expert. We're all trying to be listeners when it comes to stories like this, particularly stories that are not of our own. And when we know that we're sharing about a film in Ethiopia, about children in Ethiopia, and none of us are Ethiopian, we also have a responsibility to make sure that we're engaging with, and collaborating with people from the country. And so that's one thing that we really focused on, was being able to hire a local Ethiopian cast and crew, to really make sure that we were having the country tell its story. And I think it brought authenticity, it brought camaraderie, and I think it ultimately, we're really proud of the product that we were able to do, when you get to have people from so many nationalities, come together and work on this project. And so, yeah, I think, in whatever we do next, all these lessons are things that we take with us. And definitely, I wish I knew this, going into our first couple.
Absolutely. I mean, Josh said it perfectly, so it's hard to follow up to that. But I mean, there's so many lessons that we could go on about, like the technical stuff. But I think, like you said, it comes down to your team, and also just, I think one of the hardest thing that I had in accepting this, especially with this project, was, that things change all the time. Filmmaking is chaotic. Filmmaking, like, no matter how much you try to organize it, it's chaotic. Things are always changing, and problems are bound to arise. Like, it's not a sinking ship, but your entire time as a producer, you're just plucking holes wherever you can. But it's just a matter of, of being able to fight for a project. Like, at the end of the day, I mean, we're not getting paid for this, at least not now, but that's the way you start. And it shouldn't be something, it should be something that you're there for the long run, because it's a long process, and the people make it the best thing ever. I mean, everyone that came on knew what we were doing it for. They also understood it as a passion project. We had so much help along the way. I think another thing, I mean, is people want to see you succeed. That's, no one is really against you. Like they say, it's a competitive industry. It's true. I mean, it's hard to make it to the top if that's what you want to do. But at the same time, there's so many good resources out there, and so many people that want to see young filmmakers come up. Even like Josh and I mean, we can't really say like, ooh, we're experts because we're like 21, but it's still like, we still are here to help along the way, because what little we can offer, but the lessons that we've learned along the way, technically and not, we're always happy to share to help you along the way. In terms of what Josh was saying about connecting to the community, I think this was a very special story, and I think with true stories, or that are inspired by a true story, it's certainly like the point is to connect with the community, because I think it's hard to not practice what you preach. If you're here to raise awareness, you should know what you're raising awareness for. And I think the most impactful thing, at least for me, coming from the States or from Argentina or wherever, other than Ethiopia, was actually taking the time to volunteer and to actually do the work. We always say that, at least we've heard that, yes, we could have donated the money we raised for the budget to this, but a true brother, a true sister, a true person that cares goes in and lends, a shoulder, a helping hand. And so it was, extremely emotional and shocking, to say at least, to go and actually volunteer and see it with our own eyes. The fact that the story we were telling would become the future of these kids, and all the more motivating to bring it to life, because you get so lost in the adrenaline of shooting, of the long hours, and all the little problems that come along, like on set. But it's important to ground yourself on the story and what actually brought you to that place in the first place.
Yeah, it actually reminds me. So we had Nate Parker, who is also a writer, director, and producer on, and one of the things that he said was that it is about the story and not necessarily about the critics, and that's not necessarily about the huge return of accolades and things, but about the foundation that you're putting down for the people who are coming after you, so that they can look at something and say, not only this inspires me, this resonates with me, but also this helped my community, and now I want to tell a story that continues to elevate us. So just listening to you both talk about the importance of putting the story first, like we're young, we're not professionals, or I think you guys are professionals, but we're young, we're figuring it out and we're doing it. But it really is about the people. It is about the story, and it is about how it helps people in the future. And I think that's what Power and Community Podcast is definitely about. So I'm so glad to have you both on, but also that's what Art of Me is about, is reaching back and using film to propel a community forward. Can we talk a little bit about how this film has brought awareness to orphan children in Ethiopia? Has it inspired change? Have you seen any changes? In what way?
Just briefly, I think it starts to answer this question, but I think one of the biggest things, and I don't know if it's a lesson or advice or whatever, is the biggest help that we've received were from local organizations, NGOs, who are also trying to raise awareness locally. Because at the end of the day, this is not something that can be solved from the outside. It's not something that, people with big pockets can come in from like the States and solve it. It is a local issue. And so we're doing our best to promote local solutions. I think one of the biggest things that we've been doing has been supporting Orphan Care Ethiopia, who is one of the NGOs that we've been partnering with for the most time. And, in terms of stateside, what we've been doing has been volunteering with them remotely, because we went into the festival circuit right when the pandemic was hitting. So as much noise as we try to make, remotely with the film, we also try to, help them set up this virtual 5K run to raise $50,000 in COVID-19 relief for the orphans back in Ethiopia. And then Josh and myself and other members of the team of The Other Side have also been volunteering remotely to help transition kids out of the orphanage into their world. I mean, like college mentoring or career mentoring, etc. Along the way, obviously, I mean, Josh can speak more on this as well. We've been having talks like these, trying to, teach people as much as we know about the film and what we've learned, and also direct them to the right resources. We launched an impact campaign as well, with a companion guide that had all these resources, to get involved, to donate, the organizations that you can reach out to, as well as the initiatives that Orphan Care Ethiopia is taking in order to continue improving and helping the orphan communities of Ethiopia. Josh, I don't know if I missed something.
No, I think you got it. It's hard to do my job when she's on the ball like that. So I'm not sure how much to add, but if you guys, want to check out the companion guide, go to theothersideshortfilm.com. We do have a take action page where you can also learn about the crisis, read more about the statistics behind it and how it's come to be. We do think education in that regard is really, really helpful for people who don't really know where Ethiopia even is on a map, to people who just want to really learn more about the orphan crisis. And so we do have a list of supported organizations that we worked with while we were down there, NGOs including Orphan Care Ethiopia, the Salanta Family Project, Hope for the Fatherless. A lot of these wonderful organizations who are doing work with some strategic initiatives for children in Ethiopia. And I think one of the coolest things that we've gotten to do is be able to have this film have audiences in with people in power, whether it's been the Ethiopian embassy and the Ethiopian ambassador to the United States. He's seen the film and is adopted from some of the orphanages. And so what we're really hoping for is that in the next years, decades, that we are seeing real legislative change when it comes to kind of dealing with orphans, and really hoping that we can continue to support the organizations that are doing work on ground, because at the end of the day, those are the real heroes. We're stateside, we're just making movies, but real people making a difference are over in Addis Ababa.
Yeah, I love to hear that it's you all helping the foundation that's already there and the people who are already making change. I think that's amazing. It's admirable. And it's the goal that a lot of us should do when we're entering communities that are not our own, and we see a story that we want to tell. We see what's there already and we aid them in up their community. So I think that's very good advice to hear and take on. So here's the last part of the podcast that I like to do for our students who are listening in, our aspiring filmmakers. I just like to ask a couple practical questions about filmmaking and how you both go about creating film. So we probably have about like 15 more minutes left, so we'll try to squeeze in these last 3 questions. Can you talk to our aspiring filmmakers about the process of coming up with an idea for a film? How does a story go from an idea to a story worth telling and filming?
I think a lot of it comes from personal experience. I think it's actually exponentially harder to write movies when they're completely fabricated. I think it actually really does help when you get to write to lived experiences, to memories, to things that you understand and know. Not only does it make your film more authentic because it's actually incorporating real elements, but you realize that you start to see stories everywhere. A lot of things in Hollywood are adaptations of, real life events, or, IP from news and magazines. Newspaper clippings, all kinds of stuff. And in the same way, I like to try to look at my life and the experiences that I've experienced and really write to the memories that stick with me, write to the people who stick with me when it comes to telling stories, particularly about real people and particularly about, just topics that really exist out in that world. Go and talk to those people, go to talk to people who are engaged in that kind of work or in those communities, because they'll have stories, they'll have your stories, they'll have the ones that you can work on and put together. And I think when you put it together, I for one know that um, getting started is the hardest part for me. Getting my mind concentrated and putting an outline on the page is the hardest part. Writing, after you have an outline is beautiful, but a lot of times I do need support to even just process. I know that I, for example, don't process well alone. I need to verbally articulate. I need to call Sophia and have her sit on the phone with me for 2 hours while I just talk to myself, and she just smiles and nods, but it helps me. And if that's what you guys need, then do it, because you got to figure out what makes you tick. What's the hardest part about the writing process? I personally love outlining first and then writing from an outline. Other people just like writing and seeing where it goes. I can't do that. But I think there's a multitude of ways to make a film, but certainly those are the two things that I would really recommend.
I mean, I'm not the expert here because I write, but I don't do, you know what I mean? And I think outlining a lot of research. I definitely agree that the more personal stories to you, the better. Obviously, as you start writing something fictitious, it starts to deviate from what you know, and there's nothing like research. It's also just interesting because you get to learn so much about something that you didn't know that could bring in an inspiration, for different story points or characters or whatever. I'm personally a very visual person, so I love to listen to music that like connects to the story, or it's a waste of time to some people, Josh, but like I like putting decks together or like, a collage or something that just, it motivates me because I like to see the story. Like you said, I'm totally also of the mind of talking it through with someone. Josh is definitely the master at writing here, but I definitely love to sitting in, in these outlining calls that we do and just getting to hear how we bounce ideas here and there, whatever I can contribute. And then just getting to process it together. Obviously, remotely is super, super hard. But now I actually recently moved back to the city. So we hopefully are going to get, see the ideas like flow from one head to the other in person.
I'm definitely among the minds of being able to call somebody and just spew until like the ideas come to me. I have a Sophia as well in my life, my best friend, who's been helping me. I'm writing a novel right now and she's helping me. So the same thing with Josh about just planning beforehand has helped me a lot more. Whereas before when I would write, I would just go with the flow, and I realized that my projects weren't coming to an end. So I had to stubbornly be like, okay, you're not a go with the flow person, because now you don't have an end. You have to plan beforehand. And I was also like Sophia, who also started in writing. And I honestly didn't know that I was interested in film until after I left college. And now I'm like, oh, film. So we'll see where that goes. But having people to bounce ideas and stuff off of is so key and so important. So I definitely just vibe with you both on that. What is some practical advice you would give to young aspiring filmmakers about staying true to the stories they want to tell? And what I mean by that is just not deviating to what's trending and what's popular, but staying true to the tone, the way they express film. You know how filmmakers have a certain type of vibe, you kind of know that's a Jordan Peele film, or how can we help our students stay focused on the branding of themselves and staying true to the type of way that they like to tell stories?
think part of your answer is in the question. You know, you got to stay true to that story when you're writing something, and I think a lot of times when we look at what makes an amateur film amateur, or a student film like a student film, is that a lot of the actions are not motivated. They don't feel truthful. They don't feel real. And it's easy to spot those, you know, when you're watching something. And it's a lot harder to identify those things when you're writing the script and you feel so compelled that this is what my character is supposed to be doing because it solves this problem for me. I think what you always need is, you know, another pair of eyes to really look at it and say, hey, that doesn't sound truthful. That doesn't sound real. But really the real, you know, decision maker when it comes to what's true and what's not is you. And you need to have a really, really strong, you know, compass when it comes to determining whether or not this is staying truthful or not. The sooner you start to deviate um, from reality and from what is normal and expected, and what you would do, I think that's when it starts to show a little bit. Now, when it comes to the style and visual language that you have, that will come with time. I think a lot of younger filmmakers can get carried away with trying to emulate certain feels and to you know, be the next Christopher Nolan or whatever, and to copy things. And YouTube is great at, you know, encouraging this kind of, you know, idea, but really your story comes first. Your style will come later. It will come in the first film that you make. You know, one of the most important films to make, just to make sure that you are identifying the kind of filmmaker you are and the kinds of stories that you like to tell.
Your story comes first, your style comes later. Josh Leong. I feel like that should be a quote. I like that. I'm going to take that with me, definitely tuck it into my back pocket. So lastly, and we kind of touched on this a little bit already, but let's just talk about like having positive people be on your crew and on your team. We know that having positive people in your life is just a general rule of thumb. You kind of want those people who are going to encourage you and support you. But how does that carry over to your crew and team when creating a film? How do you choose people to join you on a journey for a film? And I know, Josh, you talked about announcing the vision ahead of time and saying, this is what we're doing, this is what we're about. But even after doing that, how are you sure? Are you ever sure that you have the right people on a project with you?
I think something that we were very concerned about was talent and experience over connection and just general like personality and character. I think you often find that the talent is there, you might just be distracted by something shinier, you know. um I think that one of the priorities that we've always done, especially like with any set that we work on together or not, is just finding people that are respectful and genuinely like kind and excited by the story. I mean, we bring it back to the story because, like I've mentioned, it's a long process. Like we're working right now, spoiler, on the feature adaptation of The Other Side. But it takes time. It's something that really like is gonna, you know, especially for a short film. I mean, we started in February and we really, really worked hard to get it done by July, or shoot by July, which is it's a fast timeline. But even still, it's like hours upon hours, even on set, where you are with essentially almost a bunch of not strangers, but people that you're just, you know, that you know here and there. Um, and I think it's just finding the people that, again, are willing to work hard, but also willing to respect the story and respect you. Um, I was once told that, you know, you don't need to be nice in order to be successful in a film. Like, and if like no one is expecting you to be nice, but I disagree. Frankly, I think like kindness comes first. Everyone is in their own world when you're on set. Like sound is trying to set up the mics and the lavs, you know, like G&E is trying to do their thing, like production is trying to stay on schedule. And like I was also, you know, as AD, like you have to make sure everyone's doing it fast and everyone's there to do their job. It's just a matter of, you know, like being respectful to one another and saying, you know, like is how you communicate. It's how you adjust to all the problems that come. So it's a matter of finding people that are, that again, like you said, understand the vision. They're also very flexible because changes come and go all the time. And that, you know, that are able to respect you and respect the story. Something that we always talk about, for instance, in terms of being flexible and all of this is, when we were shooting The Other Side, you know, we are very like, you know, Josh, myself, the DP that also came from the States, you know, the three of us going to NYU together, we're very much like, okay, we're gonna like, lunch is like not that important. We're used to eating fast and like alone, like on our phones, or like, you know, trying to do schedules and like script and this and that. And when we get there, like on the first day of shooting, our crew tells us, you know, actually, you know, we were planning on like eating lunch on the bus on our way to the next location. And they're like, actually, you know, we prefer to eat together. For us, culturally, like it's very important to share a meal as one. And we're like, but we're running out of time. Like we gotta go. And so we're like, okay, you know, like we understand, like we respect that, we understand that. And over time, you know, as the days went by, we saw, you know, like what it really meant and how much it really impacted sitting down, breaking from the filming and eating together as one. It took like, you know, it took a little bit from us because we were running behind schedule. Sometimes we're like, okay, like shoot, like, you know, should we be doing this during lunch instead? But instead, you know, we were able to listen to what they were saying and respect their wishes, and also understand like culturally, like it's very important to connect, and bring it back to the people that you're working with, to your family in a sense. And so, you know, ever since then, we started eating lunch together as one, sharing, you know, about our lives and how things were going, learning about, you know, from each other. Specific to Ethiopia, there's a very big tradition, a very traditional dish is called Injera, where you sit around a basket of a bit of a spongy, you know, it's not a crepe, but it's a spongy tortilla of sorts. I'm not really sure what you know, what it's made out of. It has layers of like meat or vegetables or sauces or whatever. And you eat it, you know, with your hands, and all from the same basket. Right now, obviously during COVID, people might be cringing at this, but the point is that you sit together, you wash your hands, you sanitize, and then you eat together from this one dish. It's very common also in a way of showing love and respect for someone to feed each other. And we were very honored to have been invited to be a part of that, you know, very ceremonious meal with our crew. All in short to say that, you know, when you're looking for people to bring into the crew, obviously talent and capability is something very important to consider, but don't be afraid to take risks on people that you just vibe with, to put in simple terms, that you just really like, you feel like you could work together, because talent is something that comes, that you can work on and that you can improve on and you can learn as you go. But you have to really be able to be willing to share that much time with someone that you respect, that respects you, that respects your story, your purpose, your vision. Because that's, you know, at the end of the day, that's really like what's at the core.
I think everything that Sophia said is so, you know, on the nose. And I think patience is the last characteristic that I would kind of seek out in people. Patience with each other. I know I'm someone, for example, who gets very easily flustered or demoralized when things aren't moving, and it's people like Sophia that are able to keep me level-headed and just be patient with me. And so I think it's all right. You're inevitably gonna come across all kinds of problems and all kinds of frustrations. And so just making sure that your team is one that can be patient and steadfast with you, then you'll succeed.
Amazing advice from you both. I have like several things that I'm going to take away from this. Just understanding that when I'm telling other community stories, that I need to be involved deeply in that community and be helping to add to the foundation that's already there. And then also understanding that style comes, and just getting it done first and staying true to the story is definitely important. And then lastly, making sure that I don't just have professional and talent connection, but I also have connections with people on a, as Sophia said, a vibe level, making sure that emotionally we connect too. So a wealth of information, as I always say on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming and just being a part and being willing to share. And before we go, can you let us know where we can watch The Other Side, how we can be looking for the next installment that you guys are going to do for the film, and then also where we can find you both on social media.
You guys can find The Other Side online at www.theothersideshortfilm.com. That's where you can find the film, where you can find our companion guide and everything around there. Follow us on social media at The Other Side Short Film, The Other Side Film 2020, and our personals. You'll find all kind of our work and our stuff. My website's joshleongstudios.com, and my Instagram is at josh_leong.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Chanda, thank you so much for having us today. You can definitely, like Josh said, reach to us, via the film's website and the film's Instagram. You can reach out to me personally through my Instagram, which is Sophia Bara _. That's SOFIABARA. And yeah, I mean, feel free to always reach out with any questions that you can. Again, we're happy to share experience as much as we know. We're never experts, we're still learning, and hopefully this helped today. But feel free to reach out whenever.
All right, you all heard it here. You know where you can get connected with these two amazing filmmakers. We are so thankful to have had you both on the podcast. And speaking of social media, please connect with us on our socials on Instagram and Facebook at artofme.org, our website, www.artofme.org. And if you like this episode, please rate, review it, and subscribe and share it, because it really helps a lot. All right, filmmakers, I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you. Bye.